I've heard every note Freddie ever sang, but this one still stops me cold. It's the sound of someone showing you their soul and then quietly walking away.
When guitarist Brian May looks back on Queen's long and dazzling history, he doesn't start with stadium anthems or roaring crowds. He starts with a single, fragile song, "You Take My Breath Away." Hidden between the grand spectacles of a day at the races, the track was Freddie Mercury stripped of armor. No walls of guitars, no thundering drums, no theatrical gestures. Just his voice and a piano, as intimate as a confession whispered in the dark. In 1976, Queen stood at a crossroads. Bohemian Rhapsody had already conquered the world, redefining what rock could be. The pressure to outdo themselves was crushing. Yet, instead of chasing something louder or grander, Freddie turned inward. He spent nights alone in his Kensington home, searching for the melody that wouldn't let him sleep. Friends said he played for hours, muttering half-formed lyrics, rejecting idea after idea until he found one that made him go still. When he finally played it for Brian, the guitarist couldn't speak.
Didn't sound like Queen. It sounded like Freddie, unguarded, human, and heartbreakingly real.
From that moment, "You Take My Breath Away" stopped being just a song. It became a window into the quiet side of a man the world thought it already knew.
Freddie called me over one night, and he said, "I've got something, but it's not for everyone."
It was early 1976. The band had just come off the high of a night at the opera, and the pressure to deliver something even more extraordinary hung over them like fog. Freddie, ever the perfectionist, seemed restless, quieter than usual, almost secretive. At his flat in Kensington, the piano light cast long shadows on the walls. He sat down, motioned for Brian to listen, and began to play. No theatrics, no grand entrances, just fingers on keys and a voice that sounded almost uncertain at first. Then, as the melody unfolded, the room changed. The notes were delicate, trembling between major and minor like a heartbeat that didn't want to settle.
I remember thinking, this isn't just a song, it's a confession, the kind you only make when no one's supposed to hear.
When the last chord faded, Freddie didn't look up. He simply whispered, "It's called You Take My Breath Away." Brian didn't answer immediately. There was nothing to fix, nothing to suggest. Just the haunting realization that Freddie had peeled back a layer he'd never shown before. Later, he told the rest of the band that the piece was too delicate to touch. Even Roger, who loved power and volume, stayed quiet. In that still moment, Queen, a band known for noise, risk, and spectacle, understood that silence could be louder than anything they'd ever played.
When Freddie walked into Psalm Studios with that song, we all knew the usual rules didn't apply.
Queen was famous for excess. Massive choirs of guitars, vocal stacks thick enough to shake the ceiling. But this time, Freddie wanted the opposite. No drums, no bass, no walls of sound. Just air, breath, and honesty. Inside the dim studio, the piano dominated the room. Mercury sat alone beneath the overhead lamp, sleeves rolled up, the ash from his cigarette curling upward in slow motion. He sang each take as if it might be his last. Dozens of vocal layers followed, all Freddie, each one more delicate than the previous. Engineer Mike Stone remembered him re-recording a single word until sunrise, chasing the precise shimmer of emotion he could hear in his head. Brian watched quietly from the control room, resisting the instinct to add his trademark guitar harmonies.
Every time I reached for my instrument, I realized it would only disturb the silence he was building.
So he contributed only a whisper, a thin, almost hidden guitar texture woven behind the vocals, like a heartbeat you only notice when the song ends. Freddie's perfectionism bordered on obsession, yet there was tenderness in it too. He wasn't showing off, he was revealing something he usually hid behind wit and bravado. When the final playback filled the room, nobody spoke. The last note faded and even the equipment seemed to pause.
It was like watching someone open a diary. You don't interrupt that. Freddie never told us who it was about. And honestly, I'm not sure he ever wanted us to know.
The lyrics of You Take My Breath Away carried a kind of nakedness that was rare for Freddie Mercury. Throughout his career, he hid behind metaphor and spectacle, dragons, divas, and grand emotions. But this song stripped away the armor. Every line felt like an open wound disguised as poetry. He sang not of fame, but of devotion, not of power, but of surrender. You can be my only dream, he wrote. Words that hinted at longing, secrecy, and the ache of a love that couldn't exist in public. Those close to Freddie said he was living through a time of quiet conflict. The band's success had given him freedom, but it had also forced him into silence about parts of his life that society still wasn't ready to understand. In that silence, he found a melody.
It's the sound of someone holding their breath between fear and love. And when he sang it, you could feel both at once.
The beauty of the song was its ambiguity. Fans heard their own stories in it: heartbreak, loss, unspoken desire. Freddie wanted it that way. He told interviewers that meaning didn't belong to him once the song left his hands. For Brian, that openness was the secret of its power.
He let people see the part of him he'd always kept hidden. But he never pointed to it and said, "Look." He just sang.
And that's why, even decades later, the song still feels like a secret whispered directly into your ear.
You could feel the entire arena holding its breath. 60,000 people and not a sound among them.
When You Take My Breath Away made its live debut, even Queen's road crew didn't know what to expect. It wasn't a song designed for stadiums. There were no drums to shake the ground, no guitar solos to lift the roof. Just Freddie, his piano, and a microphone. It began quietly. No spotlights, no introduction. Freddie simply sat down and let his hands fall on the keys. The first notes hung in the air like glass, fragile, shimmering, one mistake away from breaking. The crowd that had just screamed through "Tie Your Mother Down" now stood frozen. Even the photographers stopped clicking.
I watched him from the wings. He looked small up there, no costume, no shield of volume, and yet he filled the space completely.
Freddie's voice moved through the verses like a confession whispered to 60,000 strangers. When he reached the chorus, something shifted. It wasn't just performance anymore. It was presence. Raw, unfiltered, human. As the last note faded, the silence lingered a moment too long before erupting into applause. Freddie smiled faintly, bowed his head, and left the piano without another word.
There was no encore, no dramatic ending. He just walked off, as if he'd said everything he needed to.
For the audience, it was unforgettable. For Brian, it was transformative. A reminder that even in a band built on power, the softest voice could sometimes hit the hardest.
The applause faded, but that song stayed in the air long after Freddie walked off stage.
When the lights dimmed and the crowd began to file out, something lingered. Not the usual post-concert euphoria, but a quiet reverence. People left the arenas whispering instead of shouting, as if afraid to break whatever spell Freddie had cast. Backstage, the energy was different. Normally, Queen's dressing rooms were filled with noise, laughter, champagne, exhaustion mixed with triumph. But after You Take My Breath Away, it felt almost sacred. Freddie would sit alone for a few minutes, towel around his shoulders, head bowed, saying little.
He never explained what he felt after that song. He just had this look distant, peaceful, like he'd gone somewhere the rest of us couldn't follow.
Fans began writing letters to the band, saying how the performance had helped them through heartbreak, illness, or grief. Some even said they played it at weddings, others at funerals. The song had become a vessel for emotions people didn't know how to name. Freddie never chased that response. He didn't try to repeat the formula or turn the song into a spectacle. He simply let it exist, unpolished, pure, and deeply human.
He gave people honesty, which is rare in our business. Most of us hide behind noise. Freddie used silence, and somehow it said more.
When the stage lights went out, the echoes remained. In the halls, in the hearts of everyone who'd listened, and most of all, in the band that stood beside him.
That song reminded us who we were. It stripped everything back to the core. 4 people, 1 purpose, and a truth we didn't talk about often enough.
Before You Take My Breath Away, Queen had been racing from one explosion to another. Bigger stages, louder mixes, more daring experiments. But Freddie's fragile masterpiece forced the band to pause. It showed them that power didn't always come from volume. Sometimes it came from vulnerability. During the recording sessions that followed, something shifted in their chemistry. The arguments about arrangements grew quieter. There was more listening than talking. Freddie's willingness to expose his softer side gave everyone permission to do the same.
It changed how I wrote guitar parts. I stopped thinking about filling space and started thinking about leaving it, letting the notes breathe.
The song also deepened their respect for Freddie as an artist. They'd always known he was brilliant, but now they saw his courage. Not the kind you show on stage, but the kind it takes to be honest in front of millions. When A Day at the Races was released, critics noticed the shift too. They called the album warmer, more human. Brian believed that warmth came from one track, a quiet confession that made everything else shine differently.
After that, we stopped trying to outdo the spectacle. We just tried to mean it.
For Queen, You Take My Breath Away wasn't just a ballad, it was a recalibration, a reminder that behind all the thunder there was always heart.
People saw the showman, but offstage, he was one of the quietest men I've ever known.
The world knew Freddie Mercury as a hurricane. Sequins, spotlight, and that impossible voice that could command a stadium with a single note. But when the lights went out, another version emerged. He loved silence. He loved cats. He could spend an entire evening at home, playing Chopin softly on the piano, a glass of wine nearby, and say almost nothing.
He had this duality. He'd walk off stage after doing something monumental, and 5 minutes later he'd be asking if the kettle was on.
It was in those quiet spaces that You Take My Breath Away made the most sense. The song wasn't just about love, it was about solitude, about the fear and beauty of being truly seen. Freddie had built an entire persona out of strength, but deep down, he carried a tenderness he didn't always know how to share. Friends who visited him in Kensington often described the same scene. The piano by the window, the faint hum of a tape recorder, scraps of lyrics scattered across the floor. He'd hum softly, testing phrases under his breath, chasing melodies that only came alive when no one else was listening.
He wasn't hiding. He was protecting that side of himself. The stage was armor, the music was truth.
And for Brian, those private glimpses made the legend even greater. Not because Freddie was perfect, but because he was painfully, beautifully human beneath all the glitter.
Every time I hear it now, it still feels like Freddie's in the room, like he never really left.
Decades after its release, You Take My Breath Away remains one of Queen's most intimate works. A song that slipped quietly through the cracks of their larger hits, only to find eternal life in the hearts of those who truly listened. It was never written to top charts or fill arenas. It was built to last in silence, in memory, in moments when words fail. Over the years, fans have rediscovered it again and again, at weddings and hospital rooms, at final farewells. The track has become more than music. It's a companion to the most human parts of life: love, loss, and remembrance.
That song belongs to everyone now. Freddie gave it to the world, and the world keeps giving it back.
Even younger listeners born long after Mercury's passing stumble upon it and feel as though they're hearing something secret, a message recorded in another lifetime. Its simplicity, its raw honesty, still feels revolutionary in a world of perfection and production. For Brian, performing it live again is impossible. It was too much Freddie, too personal, too pure.
Some things should stay untouched. You can't improve on truth.
And that's exactly what You Take My Breath Away remains. Freddie's truth, captured forever in a voice that outlived the man who sang it.
You know, people always ask what Freddie's greatest performance was, but for me, it wasn't in a stadium. It was in that quiet studio, singing to no one but himself.
He paused for a long time after saying it, as if hearing the echo of that night again. There was no crowd, no spotlight, just a piano, a microphone, and Freddie's voice filling the room like light through stained glass. That was the real magic, Brian believed. The courage to be honest when no one's watching. Today, when he listens back to You Take My Breath Away, he doesn't just hear his friend. He hears time standing still.
We all get remembered for the noise we make, but Freddie, he'll be remembered for the silence he left behind.
It's that silence, that haunting stillness between notes that reminds people what made Queen more than a band. It was connection between four men who built something bigger than themselves, and between a voice and the millions who still find comfort in it. Freddie once said that music was his way of saying things he could never speak. Decades later, those unspoken words are still reaching new ears. And if you're listening to this story now, maybe it's because you've felt that same pull. That reminder that music, when it's real, never dies. If Freddie's voice ever moved you, tell us below what his music means to you. And if this story touched you, subscribe, because there are still so many echoes left to hear.